Have you ever sat at your kitchen table late at night, looking at your bank statements and felt a heavy weight in your chest? You have spent decades working, commuting, and making sacrifices for your family. You have saved diligently into your 401k or your IRA, yet the finish line still feels miles away. The news tells you that you need $2 million or even $3 million to ever find peace. It feels like you are running a race where the goalposts keep moving further back every time you get close. But what if I told you that there is an invisible line in your financial journey that matters more than any total number on a screen? There is a specific moment where the grind finally stops and your money begins to take over the heavy lifting for you. Most people miss this milestone entirely because they are too busy looking at the giant mountain in the distance. Today, we are going to pull back the curtain on the first big wealth tipping point. I want to show you exactly why your efforts are not in vain and why your path to a peaceful retirement might be closer than you think. Even if you started late, or if you feel like you are behind, this one insight will change how you look at every dollar you own. Let us have a real conversation about the moment you finally stop being the engine and start becoming the passenger. For many of us in our 50s and 60s, the word retirement has started to feel more like a threat than a reward. We see inflation eating away at the cost of groceries, and we see the stock market swinging like a pendulum. It is natural to feel skeptical when experts talk about compounding interest as if it is some kind of magic trick. When your portfolio is small, a 7% return feels like pennies, and it does not seem to change your life at all. You put in $500 a month, and the market adds $50, and you think, what is the point of all this? But this skepticism is exactly what keeps most people from reaching the promised land. The financial industry wants you to focus on the destination because they want to keep you worried and dependent. They do not talk about the mechanics of the engine because they want you to keep paying for the fuel. But you and I know that true security does not come from a fancy brochure or a complex spreadsheet. It comes from understanding the truth about how wealth actually builds momentum in the final stages. You have done the hard work of building the foundation, and now it is time to understand the structure we are actually building. The first major tipping point is not when you hit $1 million. It is the moment when your investments earn more in a typical year than you personally contribute to them. Think about that for a moment. If you are saving $10,000 a year, the tipping point happens when your portfolio grows by $10,001 on its own. This is the exact second when your money officially becomes more productive than your labor. It is the moment your shadow becomes taller than you are. For a long time, you were the one pushing the boulder up the hill, inch by painful inch. But at this tipping point, the ground levels out and the boulder starts to roll forward under its own weight. Let us look at the real numbers so this does not feel abstract. Imagine you are contributing $500 every month, which is $6,000 per year. If your portfolio is invested in a diversified fund like the S&P 500, which historically returns about 10% per year, you will hit this life-changing milestone when your total balance reaches $60,000. At $60,000, a 10% return gives you $6,000 in growth. Now your portfolio is matching your annual effort dollar for dollar. Every year after that, the gap grows wider in your favor. By the time you reach $100,000, that same 10% return is $10,000. You are still putting in your $6,000, but your money is now outperforming you by $4,000 every single year. This is why the early years feel so slow and why the later years feel like a rocket ship. In the beginning, 90% of your growth comes from your deposits. But after the tipping point, 90% of your growth comes from the math. I know what some of you are thinking right now. You might be saying, that sounds great for someone in their 30s, but I am 55 and I do not have $60,000 yet. Is it too late for me? The answer is a resounding no. In fact, the tipping point is even more critical for those who are starting later in life. When you start late, you do not have 40 years to wait for a miracle, but you do have the wisdom to optimize your life in ways a 20-year-old cannot. You can lower your cost of living by downsizing or being more intentional with your spending. By lowering the amount you need to contribute, you actually bring the tipping point closer to you. If you only need to save $3,000 a year, your tipping point arrives much sooner. The goal is not to have the biggest pile of money in the neighborhood. The goal is to reach the point where your investments can cover your basic needs without you having to punch a clock. Once you cross that first tipping point, something magical happens to the timeline. This is what we call the acceleration phase, or the snowball effect. Most people spend 20 or 30 years grinding to save their first $500,000. They look at that number and think they will need another 30 years to reach 1 million. But the math of compounding does not work in a straight line. It curves upward. If you have $500,000 invested and it earns an average of 10%, it will double to 1 million in about 7 years. You spent decades getting to the halfway point, but you only need 7 years to finish the journey. And the leap from 1 million to 2 million, that can happen even faster. At $1 million, a 10% return is $100,000 a year. That is likely more than your salary was for most of your working life. This is why the rich seem to get richer with zero effort. They are not working harder. They have simply moved past the tipping points where math does the work. But for you and me, this is not about greed or buying a private jet. It is about the freedom to say no. It is about knowing that if your boss becomes toxic or your health declines, you are not trapped. You have built a self-sustaining machine that protects you and your spouse. So how do you actually manage this transition without losing your mind in the process? The key is what I call calm consistency. The biggest mistake people make as they approach the tipping point is getting impatient. They see the finish line and they try to sprint by taking unnecessary risks with their savings. They buy into high-risk stocks or complex schemes because they want to double their money overnight. But at this stage of your life, protecting what you have is just as important as growing it. You do not need to hit home runs anymore. You just need to stay in the game and let the clock run. Think of your portfolio like a fruit tree you planted years ago. For a long time, you had to water it and protect it from the wind, and it gave you nothing back. But now the tree is mature, and it is starting to drop fruit every single season. If you get greedy and try to force the tree to grow faster by using harsh chemicals, you might kill the roots. Instead, you just keep the soil healthy and let nature take its course. Another vital piece of the puzzle for those of us in the United States is the Social Security bridge. Social Security was never meant to be your entire retirement plan, but it is a powerful tool when used correctly. If you can reach your tipping point and then use Social Security to cover your gap, you have won the game. You might find that you do not need $2 million to be happy. If your home is paid off and your investments are covering your modest expenses, you are already free. Freedom is not a number. It is a state of mind where you no longer fear the future. As we wrap up today, I want you to do one thing. Go back and look at your contributions from last year. Then look at how much your investments grew, even if it was just a small amount. How close are you to that first tipping point? Even if you are only halfway there, celebrate the progress you have made. You have already done the hardest part, which was starting when the world told you to spend. You have been the engine for a long time, and you have done a great job. But the time is coming when you can finally take your hand off the throttle. Stay consistent, stay calm, and trust the process that has worked for generations. If you found this helpful, please leave a comment below and tell me how many years you are from your target retirement date. I read every single one of your stories, and it reminds me why we do this. We are building more than wealth. We are building a legacy of peace and independence. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I will see you in the next video.